there's a good chance that you haven't heard of the railroad method for cross-stitch. Or that you have heard of it, but you aren't quite sure what it is or how to do it, or why you'd want to do it. The good news is that it's not some fancy advanced technique. It's really easy to master, and it's worth knowing even for a beginner to cross-stitch. And I'm going to answer all those questions about how, when, and why to do it. Hi there, Stitchy friends. It's Kat from Catkin and Lily here to help you up-level your cross-stitch game with tips, tricks, and tutorials so you can get the most joy from your stitching. I am going to be mentioning a few links in this video, so you'll find all of those in the description below. In this video, I'm going to be talking all about the railroad method for cross-stitch. I'm going to walk you through step-by-step how to do it, and the benefits of doing it. I'll wrap up with my thoughts on when it's worth doing it, and crucially when it might not be worth doing it. There's a lot to cover here, so use the timestamps if you want to find or re-watch a specific section. So let's start with what is railroading. Well, very simply, it's a technique you can use when cross-stitching to encourage your strands of thread to lie neatly parallel to each other. Here's what a half cross-stitch looks like without railroading, and you can see how the strands can twist around each other. In this railroaded half stitch, the two strands lie neatly next to each other. Somewhat like the tracks of a railroad, you might say. Now, here in the UK and in many other parts of the world, those things that trains run on are called railways, not railroads. But railwaying just sounds ridiculous, so let's all get on board with railroading. Okay, so now let's look at how we get those strands to lie neatly parallel. There are a few ways to do this, and although it's most commonly done with two strands, you can actually do it with more than two strands. Obviously, you don't need it for one strand. I'm going to start with the most common method, and this one does work best with two strands. Bring your needle up to the front of the fabric to start your stitch. Pull your thread so it's lying towards the hole you're going to go down in. Then place your needle between the two strands of thread and down through the hole. Pull the thread all the way through. Come back up and repeat this process to make the top arm of the cross stitch. So again, put the needle between the two strands of thread before going down through the hole. So this cross stitch I've just made is fully railroaded, i.e. I've used the technique on both arms of the stitch. But you can half railroad, so you would do it on only the top arm of your cross stitch. And of course, you can do rows of cross stitch like this. So for a row of 3 stitches, I would make the bottom arms without using any special technique. And then I'll come back across the row, railroading each of the top arms. I generally do this and railroad just the top arm, but there are some occasions when fully railroading is a good idea, such as when stitching with blended threads to help both colours show evenly. An alternative way to railroad is by using a laying tool, and this is especially helpful when you have more than 2 strands. Now, you'll see me demonstrating this one with a wooden cocktail skewer because it's what I had to hand and I was just testing out the technique. But if you're going to do this for real, then I would definitely suggest getting a proper laying tool, or at least something that isn't going to fluff up all your stitches like this wooden stick does. So, come up from the back of the fabric and pull the thread away from the hole you're going to go down in. Make sure the strands lie parallel, and you can help them do this by stroking along them with the laying tool. Take the thread over the top of the laying tool and push the needle down into the hole. Pull the thread through so the strands are snug against the tool, but not super tight. And check the strands are all still parallel. Slide the laying tool out and pull the thread the rest of the way through. The downside to railroading with a laying tool is that it is very time consuming. I reckon I could get a little quicker with practice, but it would still take a long time to do. And here's why it might not be worth it. I stitched a second block with 3 strands, and without railroading in any way, and it looks only ever so slightly neater. But it took me over twice as long to do, So much as I love a neat stitch, this didn't seem like a good time investment to me. Now you know how to railroad, let's talk about why you might want to. The first reason is for neater stitches. Because having the strands lie parallel, or at least the top ones, will give your stitches a lovely uniform finish. The second reason is better fabric coverage, because railroaded stitches will lie flatter and more spread out, so they'll provide a denser coverage of the fabric. In most situations, this won't make much of a difference, but there are a few occasions when it's useful. So firstly, when you're stitching on lower count fabric. So I'm talking about 14 count Aida or 28 count linen or even weave here. The second is when you're using dark threads on light fabric or light threads on dark fabric. And finally, if you have threads that just feel a bit thin. Some unbranded threads can be a bit thinner than others, or even dark threads of some quality brands such as DMC can just feel a little bit thinner. In all of those cases, railroading can definitely help with covering the fabric better if that's what you're after. For comparison, I stitched blocks of dark blue on 14 count white Aida, with no railroading, half railroading, and full railroading. I gave these to my husband without telling him which was which, and he could easily pick out the one with no railroading, as having obviously poorer fabric coverage and less neat stitches. Whilst he could tell the difference between half and full railroading, the difference was really marginal, and we agreed that unless you're peering very closely at the stitching, you likely wouldn't notice any difference. And you can see how long each of these took me to stitch. So half railroading added 50% extra time, and fully railroading took me twice as long. I also stitched samples with white thread on 16 count black Aida, and you can see, again, the coverage is much better, even with just half railroading. That's the two biggest reasons to railroad, but there's a couple of other smaller reasons too. One is that your thread will twist less as you stitch, so you may not need to untwist it all the time. Now, as you railroad, you will still need to make sure your thread doesn't get twisted, because if it does, it's much harder to get the needle between the two strands of thread. But you'll likely have to do this much less often than usual, and in fact I find I often don't have to do it at all. One final reason to use railroading is if you're stitching with metallic threads, as it can make stitching with them easier because the threads are less likely to twist and tangle. Here's my samples with DMC Light Effects thread, and you can tell how much trouble I was having when stitching with the Light Effects thread, as it took me roughly the same amount of time to stitch 20 crosses of this compared with 36 crosses of regular thread. I had so many snags, knots and tangles, and this definitely reduced when I was fully railroading, which is why it only took a tiny bit longer to do. So I reckon it was worth it. It was certainly less frustrating. In the interests of getting the full picture, I also tested a 12 thread, and it's maybe a little better coverage, but I wouldn't say it was any neater, and it did take a lot longer to do, so I'm not sure I thought it was worth it. If you find stitching with metallic threads a bit of a nightmare, and honestly, who doesn't, then go and check out my article, How to Use Metallic Threads to Cross Stitch. I'll link it in the description below. I guess we should talk about the downsides to railroading, and there are only a couple I can think of, but one of them is quite a biggie. The first and very minor thing is that you need to be a little bit careful when you put your needle between the two strands of thread, not to catch the thread with your needle. I don't think you'll find this a big problem once you've got used to the technique though, so just something to be aware of. The big potential downside of railroading is the extra time that it takes. If someone tells you that it won't take much extra time once you get used to doing it, I think this is wishful thinking, because it certainly isn't the case for me. Sure, I got quicker at doing it, but even now when I'm well practiced at it, doing half railroading takes me 50% longer, and doing full railroading takes 100% longer, so that's double the time. So if you're desperate to stitch as much as you can, as fast as you can, then railroading may not be your jam, because it will slow you down. After all that then, is it worth railroading? I can't answer that one for you. You're either going to subscribe to Cross Stitching Isn't a Race and I would rather my stitches look neater even if it takes a bit longer. Or I don't mind if my stitches could look a little bit neater, I would just rather get more stitching done. Neither of those is right or wrong, but you are going to have to pick. If your goal is simply to stitch as much as you can, as fast as you can, and that's totally understandable, then don't bother with railroading. If you want lovely, neat and even stitches, then railroad just the top arm. This is the perfect compromise for me. I'm okay with it taking a little bit longer to get nearly perfect stitches most of the time. If you want to get better coverage with thin threads or on lower count fabrics, so again that would be 14 count Aida or 28 count even weave or linen, then consider railroading both arms of your cross stitch with 2 strands, or maybe stitching with 3 strands. Don't forget, if you use 3 strands, that will also add a little extra time because you can't use a loop start. If you want top-notch, most perfect stitches for yourself or because you're stitching for a competition, then railroad both arms of your cross stitches. And consider using 3 strands for lower count fabrics. I do think it's worth trying out for yourself, because although it can be a little bit frustrating and slow at first, you'll soon find it becomes a habit. There are also other ways to improve the neatness of your cross stitch. And if you'd like 15 more great tips, then go and check out my article, 16 Tips for Neat Cross Stitch. Again, I'll link that in the notes below. And that's us done here. I'd love to know your experience with railroading. Is it something you already do, or something that you're now going to try out? Let me know in the comments below, or if you have any questions, then drop them down there and I'll be sure to answer them for you. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to subscribe, because I have so much more that I want to share with you. Thank you so much for watching, and happy stitching!